Noguchi reacted without thinking. She dropped her weapon to chest level and fired into the warrior's belly until her gun ran dry. The warrior fell backward. Its strange gun discharged harmlessly into the air with a hollow thump and an eye-smiting flare. The spear it held in the other hand fell and clattered on the door stoop. He did not have time to scream. Broken Tusk jumped in a split second later, but it was done. A low guttural gurgle came from the dying warrior's throat, punctuated with a spew of thick, greenish, milky, almost glowing fluid. Blood. Broken Tusk hefted his staff and brought the weighted end down on the warrior's skull. The head split with a dull, wet crack. Broken Tusk's posture indicated anger and sorrow. His huge shoulders tensed, head bowed. She had killed one of his people. Would he be angry with her? Noguchi scanned the immediate area for other dangers and then looked back at Broken Tusk again. He was much more adept than the other one she'd shot had been. It dawned on her. It would explain the difference in prowess, the difference in behaviour. Broken Tusk must be the commander. Dachande was disgusted with himself. He had been so intrigued with the Uman female, so intent on opening the door, he had not scented the Yautja. It was Oktiji, one of his less adept students. The dead Yautja's attack had been, as it seemed with all of their moods since they arrived, stupid. Look before you shoot was one of the cardinal rules. If you aren't sure of your target, the burner stays cold, the spear does not fly. Shooting a brother warrior accidentally was the height of bad manners. And quarter-wit Oktiji, breathing his last on the ground, would surely have killed them both if Datudi hadn't fired first. No doubt of it. He was embarrassed that his students were so inept. Dachande clattered a respectful appreciation to Datudi and then cracked Oktiji's head open. That his thick skull could no longer be any hunter's trophy was a disgrace, and one he had earned. Too bad he had not broken to Shinde's. Ah well. It was not likely that anybody on this world would ever find the dead student, save for scavengers. Dachande took a deep breath and frowned slightly. The Yautja's musk, the Herduise, was weak, covered with the stench of dried feces and blood. At least that explained his inability to detect the student before. He snatched the burner from the ground in irritation. A leader should not make excuses. In hunting, they did not matter. You died or you did not. At least he had a decent weapon. Dachande checked it over and growled. 4 more fires. Not much, but better than his spear alone. Dachinde's burner had been empty. He glanced at Datudi, who studied him carefully. He did not know contempt on an Uman face, but she probably felt it. Datudi motioned again towards the nest as she finished reloading her weapon. Dachande tilted his head and stepped forward, slinging the burner over one shoulder. She was right. Now was not the time for recriminations. He could dwell on his incompetencies later. Maybe. Noguchi pointed at the ship. Only a few structures away, 50 or 60 meters. Broken Tusk moved again to the 4 position. They edged forward, Noguchi careful to check the roof. They made it past the south end of the pen they'd been in before the first attack. Broken Tusk walked into the open space between 2 of the pens. Noguchi backed toward him cautiously. He hissed a warning. Noguchi spun, handgun extended. Broken Tusk crouched, hissed again, his arms spread wide, spear pointed at the sky. 2 of the bugs sprinted toward him from the shadow of the alley, joined by a 3rd, then a 4th, and a 5th. Dachande counted them quickly, then stood. Only 5. As the first 2 rushed to attack him, he sidestepped and thrust the bladed staff out. The closest one caught it in the throat. It screamed, collapsed, hit the ground. The second rammed its head directly into the durable blade. The top of its head sliced neatly from its body. Acidic blood fountained. Datudi fired her burner from behind him, the sounds loud and sharp. 2 of the running drones fell. 4 of 5. Dachande stepped in again to take out the last. It seemed not to see its fallen siblings. The creature ran straight at him, shrieking. Dachande hopped to one side as the creature neared, spear held to the other side. Except the drone hopped and matched his move, and hit him, running full speed. Noguchi aimed past Broken Tusk and fired. The first 2 shots missed, but the third took out one of the black bugs, still a dozen meters away. She trained and fired again. This time right on the target. A second fell, its corrosive blood sprayed and began to sizzle and eat into the nearest wall. She tried for the last, but Broken Tusk was in the line of fire. Noguchi turned quickly, alert to other threats. From the lector, or close to it, she heard what sounded like 100 of the nightmares. They shrieked and howled and pounded the earth, but none came into view. Noguchi spun, just in time to see the fifth bug barrel into Broken Tusk and knock him down. Dachande felt ribs snap as the drone tackled him. He'd lost his spear. The snarling bug drove its head downward, opened its mouth, exposed its inner jaws. He plunged his fist into its mouth. The alien gagged and bit down. Dachande felt the dagger teeth pierce his arm, but he drove his claw in deeper, dug deeper into the softer flesh. The drone jerked its talons away from Dachande's throat and clutched at its own. The leader brought up his other fist and slammed the bug's neck, hard. The drone spilled onto the side. Dachande let the weight of the creature pull him over to land on top of it. He grabbed for the burner that sent a shooting pain through his side and brought the blunt end down on the bug's slender throat. The drone let go of his arm and died. Broken Tusk staggered to his feet and retrieved his spear. He turned and jogged towards her. His arm was dotted with green spots where the thing had bitten him. If he felt any pain, Noguchi couldn't see it. She covered him until he reached her, and then turned towards the ship without pointing to it. He knew that much, and she'd figured it out on the way. They were going to where most of the creatures called home. Dachande ignored the jabbing pain as they edged closer to the nest. The drones would surround their queen now, protect her. They made it past the second and third structure with no more attacks. Datude paused for a second to reload her burner. Dachande glanced at her thoughtfully. She was the prey he had waited most of his life to hunt. They were small but powerful, obviously more intelligent than the Yautja had thought, and as brave as any warrior he had ever hunted with. Of course, Datude could be an exception. She was obviously trained better than the other few humans he had been in contact with. The kind one that had died, for instance. It was not trained to hunt, and had been blind to the danger he could have represented. He would have enjoyed hunting humans, but he was proud to hunt as Datude's side. This would be a tale to tell for generations to come. The human saw that he watched her and raised her fist into the air. She exposed her teeth again at the same time, probably a sign of aggression. Dachande still wore his mask, but he raised his arm also, and then clattered, as loud as he dared, the kiss of midnight. Kill or die. He was ready. They crept into the open space in front of the shield wall as quietly as possible. Ryushi's suns beat down on the nearly lifeless compound. It seemed like hours ago that Noguchi had been thinking of how beautiful the town was. Not now. Especially since the heat of the mid-morning had taken of the cloying stench of rotten decay. A lot of bodies, humans, aliens, warriors, must be cooking in the hot sunshine. The lector seemed deserted from the outside. A lone dead Rinth lay on the ground in front of the ship, its intestines ripped out. It must have staggered from the stampede to die there. Noguchi figured the bugs had nested in the ship, and that they waited there now, grouped to attack. Their actions reminded her of a bee colony, the way the drones of a hive lived only to feed and protect their queen. She shuddered slightly at the thought. She wouldn't want to meet whatever those monstrosities called Mother. The distance to the ship slowly dwindled as they crossed the compound. Noguchi's heart thumped louder with each step. She stifled an urge to go back to the empty holding pen and study Conover's map for a while longer, like 5 or 10 years. Broken Tusk walked cautiously, but not too much so. Noguchi figured he knew something she didn't. That wouldn't take much. As they neared the main loading entrance, her worries about what they would do if the door was closed vanished. The middle steel entry was halfway open, as it has been when she and Mason had gone in. Another pleasant thought. They reached the bottom of the ramp, and Noguchi looked up into the black interior of the dock. The metal door was raised horizontally, exactly the right height to let the bugs come and go. The bugs didn't seem too smart, but she wondered. Conover had spoken of one that was much larger than the others, that had slept near them when they were captives. Queen? She might have stood there a lot longer, but Broken Tusk growled at her. Noguchi took it as impatience. She took a tentative step onto the ramp. From somewhere inside the blackness, a low hiss. Noguchi took another step, gun ready for the first thing that moved. Broken Tusk was by her side, his weapon also out. He had slung the spear over his back. The dark locks stirred. Shadows shifted. She heard the clatter of an alien movement, and then silence. Broken Tusk moved in front of her. She let him. They were halfway up the ramp when a sudden flurry of motion in the dark ahead of them surprised her. She fired into the dock, twice. The gunshots clapped loudly in the still air. Whatever had moved wasn't moving now. Broken Tusk made a few guttural sounds and then walked without hesitation to the top of the ramp. He turned and motioned to her to follow. Noguchi joined him and peered inside. Nothing, at least nothing she could hear or see. It felt empty too. But there was alien spore all around. An odd wet metal smell. What looked like meaty chunks of slaughtered rinth, or human. She edged inside, adrenaline pumping. On the dark floor there were several of the unclassifieds that Revna had dissected, their spider-like bodies cold and motionless. Dark shapes lined the wall. She looked closer and then shuddered. The Lecter's crew, or at least some of them, with chests ruptured, webbed like flies in the nest of a demonic spider. Some of them had not died easily, from the expressions locked to their dead faces. Where? A jagged hole at the rear of the dock answered her. The edges of the torn metal looked melted, scorched. All around it were bizarre formations of shiny black material. It stretched and hung in thick ropes, appeared both organic and deliberate. It seemed twice as hot as outside in the burning sunlight with the humidity added. Noguchi took a shaky breath and then moved into the darkness. Broken Tusk walked ahead of her to the hole and waited. She heard a chittering movement come from deep inside the ship somewhere and steeled her nerves as she approached. They were going to have to find the control room, which meant going in, navigating a labyrinth of corridors, climbing 2 flights of steps, and unlocking a locked door. Broken Tusk watched her for a second and then stepped into the hole. Noguchi prayed silently to anyone listening and followed him.